like to, if it's too long of an answer, just shut me aside. But a lot of weed goats and parasites are a big issue, which is why we drive toward a winter kidding. And I completely get that the forage is in the wrong place at that time, but do you have any knowledge about how parasites are affected, or if I get it right, I won't have parasites? I think that would be a great answer.
Okay, let's go. We'll do what I was going to do a little bit later, but the questions come up and that's great. So it doesn't matter if it's cattle, goats, whatever it is, we're going to work with this scenario and just put goats in where cattle are. So if you're a conventional rancher, you've got cattle in most of these paddocks and small herds all over the place, and you run around in a tractor feeding bales to all these with that white stuff on the ground. But then what I'm suggesting you do is you put all your animals together, okay, because you're wanting to increase stock density. So you put your animals together and you put them in this paddock and you start moving. So to explain it better, I'm going to do this. Now the reason I didn't do this first is I don't want you to see straight lines and I don't want you to go and buy more fencing. Holistic management is not about fencing. It's about management. But if they're in here in paddock number 1, and you're a good conventional farmer and you've now decided to do holistic management, you put all your animals together, so everything is now in paddock number 1, but you can't get rid of the habit of feeding a supplement. So I don't care what your supplement is, but you feed the supplement and you feel good, and the first day you're feeding the animal supplement, how much do they take? None. Okay. But if they're all over the property, in each paddock, as time goes, they eat more and more and more supplement. Am I not right? Everybody has experienced this. Correct. But now I've changed it. I put all my animals together, they're in one paddock, and I move them. Let's say I'm going to move them, I'm going to do temporary electric fencing in here and might move them within that paddock and all the property on the farm once in 30 days. In other words, in 30 days, I'm back in 31 days, I'm back in paddock number 1. I then continue to feed the supplement. How much supplement are they going to take? No. Why? Because you are giving them selection of a mixed grill at every paddock, and by the time they get to the 3rd paddock, they know not to just eat the chocolates and leave the boiled sweets behind, because they're going to have an unhappy day. So they eat chocolates and boiled sweets all together. You are treading down carbon, and when you come back here in 31 days, this paddock is going to be better than what you've ever grown on this property. Okay, because your cattle aren't staying there all the time.
Is 31 days enough?
I'm just using that as an example. But over time, so you keep your stocking rate the same for at least a year, you will grow more grass. Okay? So when you go into the winter, you might still like to use your tractor and your baler because you're going to have so much grass that you're going to have to do something with it. It doesn't matter if that's what you want to do. But I'm telling you that within next year you can buy more animals to do the work of the tractor and the baler and just go through and graze it. And the more carbon you've got on the soil and in the soil, the warmer the soil is going to be, the sooner your grass is going to green up to the point that you are going to have cool season grasses growing in the middle of winter under the snow. Now, I know you don't believe me, I come from Africa and I'm stupid. But I promise you it happens, because that's the way nature used to. Okay. Same thing with goats. Now, if you don't have any goats in that paddock for 30 days, the eggs of the parasites will die. And your goat pH will be probably at 7 because you're giving it a mixed grill the whole time. they are better able to fight the parasites. Okay. When they come back, the eggs have all died, and there's another thing that I was going to do. And if you're giving them free choice minerals and they've got parasites, they'll be eating excessive sulfur. Now, the more sulfur an animal takes in, the less parasites it's going to have. So if you've got a tick problem, which we've got in Africa, you feed 17 grams of sulfur per day to an animal for 6 weeks, and it'll have no internal or external parasites, and accordingly with smaller stock as a proportion. So animals self-medicate. But if the pH is wrong, they can't self-medicate because that particular mineral at that pH is not absorbed into the bloodstream. And so it goes on, but we'll come to that at the end. Does that explain what you were...
Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Any questions? Yes?
Speaking of goats, can we replicate the effects of high stock density of cattle on land with goats, you know, being smaller?
Chicken, goat, sheep, cane rats, pigs, rats. But it would be better if you had them all in. So if you go through with the cattle and then the chickens and then the pigs and then the goats and the whatever.
Wait, I'm sorry, it would be better to go in separately or go in together?
Together if you can manage it.
But it's hard.
You know, there's one rancher who decided that he wasn't going to have his sheep separate. And he bought sheep, he had cattle, but he had an unbelievable population of coyote. And the sheep then came in, and he had heard that when you bring sheep in, you must just leave them. Don't do anything. And they will sort themselves out. So yeah, he lost a lot of sheep from coyotes. And the coyote soon learned that if it wandered further than a couple of meters from the cow, it was dead. So all the cattle had sheep next to them. And it all went hunky-dory and went fine, and he made a lot of money out of his sheep. Until the coyote got a disease, and the coyotes died, like flies. So the sheep realized the coyotes are no longer there and spread out all over the place. But as what happens in nature, you get an equilibrium. So there's an explosion, and it gets to equilibrium, and the predators of that explosion go the opposite way. And here at equilibrium, the coyotes were happy, the sheep were happy living with the cows. The coyotes died, the sheep went away, and now the coyotes started to breed back. And the sheep got killed until they reached the equilibrium here. And that's what happens with all organisms. And it's exactly the same with parasites. If you keep dosing your goats, they never reach equilibrium, and you will have to continue dosing. It might be cheaper, and remember, do a marginal reaction, because I'm saying it might be cheaper just to let them die. You know, everybody sits here and is worried about all the silt going into Chesapeake Bay. And you've got the CRP ground. I call it trap ground. That ground is actually worse than allowing the animals into the creeks. Where do you think the bison went to get water? They went into the creek. What size were the fish then? 10 times the size they are now. What's happening? We fence off all the creeks because the government says we're upsetting Chesapeake Bay. It's creating a faster and faster river. We're managing with set stocking. We've got no carbon on the soil. The water goes from the rain straight into the stream, down the stream as fast as it can. We're getting more and more urbanized on the sides. They're building hardtop roads. They've got roofs on the houses. The water hits the river at 100 miles an hour. Okay, and it goes into that river, and there are no corners. Hey, it just wants to go straight. So it just takes all those walls out, falling into the river, and dumps it in Chesapeake Bay. But if they allowed us to put the cattle in, take the fences out. The cattle would knock down the sides. The bottom of the river would actually lift because as they knock down the sides, it pushes the river and makes it snake.
But some of this has to do with if you have a little system in there. If they're in there, the set stock and where you've got 10 cattle on 10 acres with a stream through the middle, that's the challenge, isn't it?
That's the
It's a
challenge.
bigger system that has to be addressed.
All systems will fail. So you've got to remain flexible, and depending on the grass, on what is happening, and moving the animals to allow for recovery periods. Okay? Your banks then come to 45 degrees. It enables the grass to grow. You have a recovery period so the grass grows tall. When the river floods, the grass lies down like a blanket and prevents the banks being washed. A tree falls. So what we had was a straight river because of the speed. Everything is going. Then we put cattle in and they break down the bank here. So the river then does this. And automatically it's going to do this. And then a tree falls across the river here. And it does that. And that's slowing down the river. And our wetlands will become re-established because as the water slows down, the bulrushes grow, cattail, and you call them cattails in this country. They grow, the water slows down, it filters the water, the silt stays where it should stay and doesn't end up in Chesapeake Bay.
But if you have a farmer that says, no, I don't want to give up that land and I want that stream to stay straight, and you have that, that's our system's challenge, is it not?
So really it's a problem, and it's about educating the people on the land to understand the concept. And it's no good passing another law, because really the law should be taken off the books and more spent on education to explain to people what is best. And I'm sure there are not many people in this room who are saying what I'm talking about doesn't make sense. I mean, people on the land have an inherent understanding of what's happening in nature. But a lot of it is because of the teachings that we've had in our educational systems. We don't quite understand it. We see something different, but we don't understand. So it's a two-edged sword, and I accept what the problem is. Okay. So we need to look after our water streams, and in actual fact, the fish that used to be caught in the rivers were bigger than they've ever been. And it's got nothing to do about dirty water or cattle dunning in the water. The only problem is Pam nearly divorced me because I've got so much litter on the ground that the water now, because we don't drink from a borehole, tastes different because it's full of carbon. It's like drinking tea. Compost. That's why I'm so healthy. No parasites. Now obviously something different is happening on that fence line. I own all that ground. But because I didn't have enough cattle once I started to understand the concept of holistic management and high density grazing, I didn't have enough cattle to get the density I wanted, so I leased out 2/3 of my property. Because what was happening before is I had an excess of grass and I was like a fox terrier peeing on the corner posts. I couldn't get my stock density up enough because I was trying to manage the whole property. So having leased out 2/3 of the property, I leased out 2/3 of my solar panel. The money I got from the 2/3 I leased out, I was able to use that as a supplement to help me achieve what I wanted to achieve on the area that I kept for myself. The frightening part was that area that I was managing required more and more and more and more animals. And that is what was frightening, because there is no end. So anyway, that is my property on the one side there. Just make sure you see this side. That side, I don't know whether you can see it, the light is, maybe we should turn these lights off. That side there is leased out, and it's conventional ranching farming. They burn once in a while, except that we said we would rather they didn't burn. Okay? They put their cattle in, they did some form of rotation. Thank you. They did some form of rotation. And on this side, I managed with high stock density, recovery periods, Zodobacter, the bacteria that are taking nitrogen from the air and fixing it into the soil, were operating. Now, I don't have to tell you guys as people on the land as to which side is capturing more energy. But not only that, because that grass, the grass on the side is not stressed, it's not pushing up seed so quickly. Now we know that everything that is stressed breeds like crazy. You put people to war, they breed. You go to a herd of plains game and try and shoot out all the males, they will breed like flies. And it's exactly the same with grass. If it is stressed, it will breed, it will put up seed, because it's the only way it can sustain that species, by breeding. So we are perpetually stressing our grasses because of the way we manage. And then we've got a window period of 15 days in which to graze certain grasses because they are unpalatable, and that's what we've left because of the way we manage. And that's the only time we can eat that grass because it's the only time it's palatable. Now what is palatable grass? It's vegetative grass. Yes, but what is vegetative? A grass stays vegetative if it doesn't have to seed. It's a relaxed grass. It starts bending its leaves and showing the sun and yawning and saying, this is me. So allow your grass to have that. So you might have a slightly longer recovery period to capture more energy, but you will get shorter when more of your sward is capturing energy because it's more in a vegetative state. And only roughly 20 to 30% of your grasses will actually seed by the time you graze it. But not only that, instead of having a 15-day window period to graze them, you've now got a 3-month window period to graze them because they're all relaxed. They're not stressed. They are staying in a vegetative stage because really they're happy to be in a vegetative stage. And you're capturing more energy. And that's exactly what's happening. And it is so simple. Maybe you understand what I'm getting to here about educating people. They've seen it, but they don't know why. And it's just fertilizer. You've got to put nitrogen on. You know, the story, it has to be nitrogen. Yes, but there is more than enough nitrogen to not spend a cent on nitrogen. If they go broke, good.
How long did you have to rent out your property before you were able to either use your profits from the animals to buy enough animals to move back over to the rest of your property?
3 years. You can change us in 1 year to this. And it doesn't matter where you farm or ranch. It can be brittle, it can be non-brittle. This will happen at different speeds though, depending where you are.
So if you don't have enough animals and you've got, say, 50 acres and 10-acre paddocks, would you just leave 2 of them and only manage 30 acres for a year?
Well, lease them out to your neighbor or get him to mow them. The thing is, once you know how to rectify it, it doesn't matter what anybody does because in a year you can fix it. As long as, if they're burning, you don't allow them to burn in the last year before you take it over. So what you want is you want to come in with this much dead material at the beginning of winter. Oh, what a blessing. Because you put that on the ground, I promise you next year, just in 1 year. And one of the slides we come up with, 1 year had the same, in fact it was on the other side of that hill, it was up there. 1 year of treating the litter down made the difference. Yes, ma'am.
How do you handle water?
That's an issue. But I can't suggest unless you need to know your own property and make your own decision. It's one of those decisions that I can't make for you. And it's all about one of the limiting factors. So once you've got a water problem, you go into an energy conversion weekly, and you need to sell some animals to pay for the water. So I took out all my fences and I fenced so that everything drinks from a natural stream or dam. I have no boreholes, I have no piping, I have no drinking troughs.
Are all your paddocks, do the animals have access to the water all the time, or are they in dry paddocks at times?
No. Access to water all the time.
Okay.
Last time we bought it's got a big river running through it, and it used to be a wetland, so the river does something like this. And it had fences, let's put them in black. It was fenced conventionally and it was sort of like this, and the whole river was fenced off, they were good. And they listened to the Department of Agriculture and everything was fenced off. I don't know, but it's just, it was conventionally fenced. Different slopes were separated from other slopes. Anyway, I came along and I took all the fences out because it was lucky they were rotten. And I fenced the property like this with electric fencing.
Those are straight lines.
If I'd known then not to do a straight line, I would have done it differently. You must remember I've been learning for 20 years and I've made lots of mistakes. And I hope you don't make the same mistakes. So what I do is I put a back fence here, the cattle go in, and I put a front fence there. And then I move. Now some of my herds are moving 5 times a day. Because I've managed to get the herds to that size that to get the right stock density and the treading, grazing to tread ratio is right. They're moving 5 times a day, but they can walk back to water. As long as the walking back to water here is not longer than 5 days. Because at 5 days you're going to start overgrazing. Okay. And then the same. So we go this way and then we come back this way. And it works very, very well. And the banks, they were very steep when I bought this property. And yes, I did lose some cattle because the banks were so steep. But you know, an animal only dies once. So if it falls off the bank and dies, it won't die again. So that's fine. You just carry on. Any questions on that?
You have to think about, one of the realities we have here is stormwater runoff off of roads and stuff like that has things that may not be as ideal for animals. Is that an issue where you are pretty much out in the bush?
We've got main roads and highways through us, so you monitor the water, you look at it, and the cattle will tell you. If an animal goes to water and smells it and then blows and pushes its tongue around and there's something wrong with the water. If it goes to the water, smells and does 73 swallows, then the water's good. Watch the animal. But if you take it to the lab, you'll panic. Because really your cattle should all be dead. No, I'm serious, people. Ask the animal. And the animal knows better than any of us.
How do you deal with shade?
Shade. Shade's not an issue.
No.
Cattle, animals don't need shade if their pH is correct. If the